Hi, everyone. I am here with Radhule Weininger. She is the author of Heart Medicine. Thank you, Radhule, for being here.
Thank you so
So,
much for inviting me.
yes, I'm so excited to hear more about your book. Can you tell us what inspired you to write it?
Really, the direct inspiration came from by walking with my mentor, Jack Cornfield. You might have heard about him, the meditation teacher.
Yes.
And we talked about long-standing patterns, like I think Jung calls them complexes, and which I have been working with and many other people too. And so Jack said, could you find a different name? And so I was really thinking about it. And I thought, how about long-standing, recurrent, painful patterns? And then he said, that's too long. And so I said, how about LURPs? And then when I was teaching, people kind of liked it. They said, oh, I feel LURPed, or I feel, like gunked, or, I feel slimed, or I feel, oh, that LURP again, or, so it became a thing, but maybe in a wider way, having dealt with my own long-standing painful patterns and having seen them in my psychotherapy practice over 35 years, I just thought it would be good to look at them from a psychological and a spiritual perspective.
Yeah. And I didn't realize you made that term up, and it is perfect. The whole LURP. I feel LURP. Yeah, it's a great acronym. So where did heart medicine come from? Talk a little bit about the title.
Well, my first book that is here, took
Okay.
one of each to Ireland. It's
Wow.
called Heart Work, The Path of Self-Compassion.
Okay.
So most of the time, being a mindfulness teacher and also being a psychologist, it's very much dealing with the mind. And I find we really have to go into our hearts as well, as much as into our minds to really heal.
Yes.
So that's why I thought of it's really medicine for our hearts. And I also see the heart as an organ of psycho-spiritual connection. It connects the different aspects of ourselves, whether it's the heart as a pump for blood, whether it's an emotional center, whether it's neural or electromechanic or whatever it is, whether it's spiritual, and in some way, which I certainly can't figure out, the heart seems to be really important.
Yes, it is definitely important. I feel it. So, how is your book different than others on the market?
Well, I think my book really goes into the space between the psychological and the spiritual. And I think there aren't that many books. And especially, I haven't really found books that talk about complexes or LURPs. When we look at mindfulness, there is quite a bit of research done on triggers, more like moment by moment difficulties.
Yes.
But triggers often lead to a deeper wound. And I think sometimes or quite often that is not really given enough attention in the mindfulness research. I guess it's harder to research. It's easier to look, at anger. Okay, I do this and the anger goes away, or I have anxiety and I do this and the anxiety subsides. But to understand a deeper wound that might be old, or there for a long time, it's harder to research and it needs more care to understand and to heal. And so I think I haven't seen that many books, and I did a pretty good literature search.
Yeah, I agree. I've read a lot of inspirational, motivational, self-help books, and I rarely see one about trauma and how to heal from it. So you had mentioned LERP in the beginning. Can you go into more detail on what a LERP is and how we can recognize LERPs?
Mm-hmm. So a LERP is what Jung or Freud actually in the olden day described as a complex, which is kind of a coming together of patterns, of emotions, of thoughts, of memories, traumatic memories, often of experiences that somehow are sitting there in our system. I think in Buddhist psychology, they call them samskaras or shankaras.
Mm-hmm.
And according to Buddhist philosophy, they're like seeds in our mind stream. They even believe that they are there for lifetimes. And when the right or wrong causes and conditions come together, then they flare up. And so I think that's how I understand a LERP. So let me give an example. For example, my long-standing patterns around abandonment or rejection. Because, my mom, for whatever reasons, had to leave me in a kind of a children's home the first few years of my life. And so sure enough, this is a problem. And I did, plenty of therapy to deal with all of this. But it will always be a little scar, or maybe a wound. So if there's, let's say, a rejection or a perceived abandonment that might other people just shrug off, that gets to me. So, but it actually really helps me to know my LERP, because otherwise I might get mad at myself. Why can't I shrug this off? Why can't I just do the Teflon thing and let it run off? Yeah. Why does this get to me? Didn't I do enough therapy, or did I not meditate enough, or whatever? And so recognizing a LERP is really helpful. And that comes to the second half of your question. How do we recognize a LERP? Do you want me to go into that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So first, often we recognize a body feeling. I think for everybody, it's a little different. They're the thinking type and feeling type and body types. And, we all have slightly different access points. But I often feel a LERP, let's say, as if somebody hit me in the stomach, or I suddenly feel cold or hot, or I feel tight, or maybe winded, or if I feel angry, I might feel really hot. And so it helps to recognize that. And then another symptom is an emotion that might feel stronger than we expect it to be. So, for example, say, wow, this really got to me. This made me so sad. And so we are not surprised. We just allow ourselves to be sad, give it some space, rather than kind of criticizing ourselves or thinking that we are crazy or something like that. Another symptom would be rumination, to really have the mind go crazy and go in circles, especially at 4 a.m. or too early or too late. And so then to recognize, this is the wound to the heart, actually calms often this rumination down. It's like when we come, why didn't they invite me to their birthday party? Or, whatever it might be. And then, that hurt. And I understand why that hurt. Not self-pity, but self-understanding, kind of like an I-thou self-understanding does really help. Other symptoms of LURPs might be, symptoms that we might feel after trauma or PTSD, like a bit feeling of tunnel vision, or suddenly we feel numb. We feel too much or too little. And actually often the too little feeling is a sign, there is really a deep hurt underneath. Or a generalization. It's like, it's not just my Aunt Zelda who forgot my birthday. It is actually the whole world that doesn't like me, So that kind of generalization we sometimes do is also a symptom. And knowing these symptoms and identifying them helps us then to treat them with compassion.
Yes. I just love how you broke it down into simple terms, as if you're feeling something, and to become self-aware of, okay, I'm feeling this. Why might this be? And to not judge yourself and to have compassion for yourself, like you said, that is amazing, because I think many people, including myself, are quick to get upset with ourselves for feeling a certain way, and so just sit with it, give it some space, recognize it. And would you say that's the first step in a healing process?
Definitely. I think recognizing is the first, because that kind of brings awareness in.
Yes.
Because without awareness, we can't do anything. We are unconscious, so to speak.
Yes.
And then this mix of mindfulness and compassion or self-compassion tools are really helpful. Mindfulness tools as noticing the body, noticing when emotions arise and pass through, noticing when thoughts come, and knowing that everything is change and that they all pass through is really helpful. And then, as you said, treat them with kindness, with compassion. It's not our fault.
Yeah, I agree. And you have a lot of meditations. I didn't count them, but there are many meditations within this book, and they all target a different, like self-forgiveness, self-awareness, mindfulness. Why did you include meditations, and why are they important?
Traditional psychotherapy often had the aspect of understanding. Why do I react the way I do to my mother or to my sister or to my father, or what is my thing with authority figures, or, what happened in my childhood. And I think that's very, very important work. But understanding sometimes doesn't really work with the process of what's happening.
Yeah.
So having these tools like, oh yeah, now I feel my body. And I know anger is arising and falling away, or, noticing not just the content, but the process of what's happening is really important. And that's one reason, just psychologically speaking, why meditation is really important. And second, when I was 22 and a half, and I started meditating in Sri Lanka. I was a medical student in Germany then. And I just kind of unknowingly dropped into this monastery there. And it wasn't really planned, but then I ended up there for almost 2 months. So I realized that meditation really gives me a sense of inner home. That kind of helps me to make friends with myself. And that was really surprising to me, because honestly, when I started meditating, I didn't know anything about it. Didn't reach Germany in the 70s. We didn't know, we were in California, right? And so,
yes.
especially not in medical school. So it was really new. And so I had a real experiential experience without any expectations. And I realized the more I was sitting and just being with my body, being with my breath, being with the energy around me, the more peaceful I became. It's not that my bones didn't hurt or feelings didn't come up, but altogether I became more and more peaceful. I remember actually that monk there asked me if I wanted to become a nun. And I was really quite tempted. I thought, oh, maybe. But then, I had this obligation to go back to med school, and I did. And so it was really a wonderful, very spontaneous experience of inner peace, which goes beyond an intellectual or even an emotional understanding.
Yes.
And I think that is another way. So I had just started therapy at that time, age 22, 23, and started meditation. And so both paths ran parallel for me for now 42 years. And so I just really, and then it wasn't really considered to be done side by side. Now I think that's actually what many people do and recommend. But then my psychotherapist didn't speak very kindly of meditation. They thought it was kind of out in the left field and whatever. And my meditation teachers didn't understand why I would want to do psychotherapy. But I kind of intuitively knew that I needed both.
Yes.
And I'm glad I stuck with it. I just stopped telling them about each other. And then Jack Kornfield, when is that, 20 some years ago, he's all for it. But it took a while for, psychology and spirituality to catch on. So I think meditation is really important as giving ourselves a home in ourselves, allowing ourselves to make friends with ourselves.
Yes. I love the blending of the two, the therapy and the meditation together. I hadn't ever thought of it that way before, but I can see why that would help someone, process what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about who would benefit most from your book, Heart Medicine.
Well, definitely people with LERPs.
Yes.
People who feel like they are dealing with some wounds that still to this day rear their heads. And I think that probably means many people, maybe almost everybody, I don't know. And so I think it's definitely useful for us folks. Mm-hmm. And then I think people who are maybe avid meditators, it might deepen their practice. Mm-hmm. Kind of go a little bit more into depth. Mm-hmm. A part of psychology is called depth psychology, especially the Jungian type. And I find it very fascinating and wonderful. And I think that depth is a really good thing to balance the meditation practice out with, because sometimes we can make what we might call a spiritual bypass. Did you hear that word before? Spiritual bypass is, I think John Velwood coined that word already in the 70s, and it's used quite a bit. It's when we use our spiritual practice to bypass emotions. Mm-hmm. It's like, I just become spiritual. I just let it go. I smudge a little bit. and nothing against smudging. It's wonderful. My husband is a firekeeper man, but I just think it's not instead of really profound, deep work on yourself.
Yes. Yes, I could see that now. I never heard the term spiritual bypass, but I know what you're talking about. And you're right. You could use that tool, but also do the deep inner work. And that is exactly what your book helps people deal with. Mm-hmm. So if you had one or two things you would like readers to take away from your book, what would they be?
Well, I would really like people to walk away with an understanding of what LERPs are and how to recognize them. Mm-hmm. And then I think it would be really important that people know not only about mindfulness, really being with them on a physical, emotional, sensate level, but also really know self-compassion. I think self-compassion is really important. And besides self-compassion, compassion for others. We are all just humans. We are all interdependent. We are all part of this web of life. So I think sometimes psychotherapy, and I say that as a psychologist, psychotherapist, but it could make us a little bit self-preoccupied. Mm. I hear that quite often, So, oh my gosh, there's a huge dog coming into my house. No, dog, you can't. Okay, maybe it just
do you know
down.
This dog?
I hear he's coming from the neighbor farm. Okay, let me just throw him off. Yeah, let me. He's a beast. Let me try to get him out.
Oh my God. Okay.
Okay. Doggy, come here. No. We have to lock the doors. When he's
Wow.
he is a beast.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. The dog wants therapy.
Yeah, he has maybe some nerves.
Yes.
He wants to see if there's breakfast or lunch or something. So what I would like people to take away from this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So self-compassion is really an important one.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Being kind to themselves, but also to others.
Yes.
And to realize that we all are interdependent, that we are all interconnected. And I think that's part of the beauty of the Buddhist path.
Yes.
And sometimes we need to forgive ourselves and others.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, I think what I also like people to take away from this book is that sometimes service helps.
Yes.
Not in a martyr way and self-effacing way, but more it makes ourselves feel stronger and more courageous and more connected. Yes. And takes us out of our isolation. And so I think service where we also take care of ourselves, I think can be really healing. And then the last thing I would really like to underscore is that I got really interested the last several years by wake awareness meditation, which come more from the Tibetan tradition, but they can be quite secularized, you might say, where we see awareness not just as a moment-by-moment phenomenon, but something we can rest into. Yes. We can rest as something that's already there. And we can experience that after long retreats. I think there is a sense of bliss or of well-being or already home. Yes. But with the pointing out instructions, there are actually ways to experience that in a much more streamlined way, where we can get little glimpses of that every day. And I find that so helpful, especially with LERPs, because then we are able to hold a wider perspective. And I have to say, I always bring this now into my teaching of meditation and of psychology, because I think it's kind of like mindfulness plus, it's not, it's both, like Jack Kornfield said to me, can you find a bridge between mindfulness as we know it and mindfulness that includes awake awareness? So I think just because it makes the perspective wider, it's really helpful, especially with LERPs.
Yes. I'm really glad you brought up service, because that is one part of your book that I loved. I loved how you went through this different stories of some of your clients and how they came out of themselves to help others and started volunteering and using what they had gone through, what to help others. And I related to that. And it's almost as if I now want to be called to do some type of service as well, to get out of myself, to help others. And I don't think your clients were healed per se, but it helped them in their journey.
Mm-hmm. And, I think in a way what you're doing here is a great service. I think that completely is one wonderful example, and I don't know you, but I imagine there's a story how you got here. And so, so I think in a way the service calls us, but then we have to listen. And, there's a story of the wounded healer. In Greek mythology was Chiron, the centaur with the wounded hoof, who basically became the first surgeon. The word surgery comes from Chiron.
Okay.
And Asclepius, who was the illegitimate child of Apollo and a sea nymph, and lost his mother at birth, and was basically brought up in shame. And he worked with people with dreams, with healing dreams.
Yeah.
I think in Crete. And so in the Asclepian healing temple. And so I think both of those and many of us are examples how our wounds can make us better healers or neighbors or mothers or fathers or whatever we are.
Yes, that's very profound. And those stories are fascinating. So where can people find more about you?
Well, I have a website, radhuleweininger.phd.com. And I also founded a nonprofit together with my husband 6 years ago, mindfulheartprograms.org. And I taught for 18 years at a local retreat center, La Casa de Maria, which then was destroyed in a mudslide in 2017. But we teach around town, and we started with COVID quite a big online offering of meditations.
Okay.
And so if you look up mindfulheartprograms.org, we offer all of them for free.
Oh, nice.
So people can always come. We try to make it really easy to join, so you can just press join. Then you end up in a waiting room, but you don't have to, work on a donation basis. We try to make it really easy for people to come, especially during COVID. And sometimes I teach at Omega, or I did in the past at Esalen, or I teach quite regularly at Inside LA. Or mainly through our platform, and some local offerings in Santa Barbara.
I love that you offer online meditation. I'm going to have to check that out, because I have a hard time sitting by myself and doing it. But if I was virtually guided, I think that would be convenient.
It is. And, quite often we found out now that when people are just left to their own devices to sit, it just ends up in a mind-wandering session.
Yeah.
To practice mind-wandering.
Yes.
And so if it's guided in a good way, you know, that you're actually relaxed and awake,
Yes.
you know, and really learn to be present, then a good guided meditation is really helpful.
Yes. Yes. Fabulous. So where can readers find your book, Heart Medicine?
Well, they can find it on our websites.
Okay.
They connect right to Amazon or Goodread or indie books or all these booksellers. You find it in some of your local bookshops, at least in Santa Barbara. Or now and then I see it, or people send me pictures. I found it in Seattle or in Big Sur or wherever. So that's nice. But otherwise, I think all these online places or through our website. Amazon definitely has it, but I know some people don't like Amazon. So there's Goodreads.
Okay, and bookshop.org, I probably has it. Yes.
All those places.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning, Radhule. Our conversation was enlightening, and I am so happy to meet you.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.